Right. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to chair this session titled Mediterranean Cooperation for Innovative Environment and Resource Governance. My name is Simone Borghesi. I am the director of the climate area at the Florence School of Regulation of the European University Institute. I'm Vice-Rector for International Relations at the University of Siena and president of the European Association of Environmental and Resource Economists. I'm particularly glad, I have to say, to chair this session today because it's the occasion to launch also at the prestigious event like COP29, an idea, a network that is dear to my heart, that is MEDAERE. MEDAERE is the Mediterranean Association of Environmental Resource Economists, which we launched some months ago, and we are working on it together. And it aims to unite researchers that work in the field of environmental and natural resource economics on the Mediterranean. The association builds on the strong regional cooperation that has already existed for many years within the European Association, and it wants to expand it to recognize our shared Mediterranean values. And in doing this, it joins the worldwide tradition of other regional associations of environmental economists, such as the American one, the African one, the Asian one, and the Latin American Association. They are all united in the World Council of Environmental and Resource Economists. What are the objectives of the association? Well, we want to create, as I said, a network of environmental resource economists that work on the Mediterranean issues. We want to organize trainings, joint projects, so research collaborations, and knowledge exchange, favor knowledge exchange, particularly among young scholars in their early stage of their career. Obviously, we also aim at progressing on regional sustainable development and environmental issues in practical terms. And we want to do joint proposals and find together policy solutions to face the common environmental challenges that we have to face in the Mediterranean. The topics, unfortunately, are many, because many are the problems that we have to face. So they include, but they are not limited to, the transition away from fossil fuels, the scaling up of renewable energies, waste management, pollution, both air and water pollution, water scarcity, which is a particularly severe problem in the Mediterranean, land use and food security, natural resource conflicts that unfortunately we observe, we experience, and hopefully natural resource cooperation in the future. And talking about cooperation, infrastructure cooperation will certainly be key in the future. And we want to address natural disasters that, again, unfortunately, we have to experience more and more often. Think of what happened in Spain recently, and the consequent also cases of climate-related migration from other regions of the world. These are just a few ideas. Unfortunately, there are others that might emerge, but in any case, would emerge as we go in a discussion with the other members. Talking about members, partner and member institutions can be universities, think tanks, and independent research institutes. All the members of national associations for environmental economists on the Mediterranean will be given the option to join and become members, but the association will be open to new applications from actors that do not belong to any national association, because on the Mediterranean we have just the Italian, the French, the Spanish, Portuguese association, but we have colleagues who are spread from all countries of the Mediterranean, and not only European ones. The association tends to be, as we say, no flag, meaning that the members will represent the Mediterranean and not the country of origin, because this is a sort of experiment, I would say, of climate diplomacy. And so we don't want people to be divided by flags, but united by the Mediterranean belonging, so to speak. Experts from the northern, the southern, and the eastern shore of the Mediterranean are currently at work on the co-creation of a statute. The next step will then be to propose the statute and open up to all interested individual and institutional members. And we aim at having an annual MED workshop or conference, building upon the successful experiences that we had so far, back to back with the annual conference of the national associations. So we had a Mediterranean workshop in Cagliari 22 and Naples 23, back to back with the annual association of the Italian one. And recently in September 24 in Lisbon, back to back with the AERNA, Spanish-Portuguese annual conference, biannual conference. And also other workshops are emerging at, let's say, local levels. We had one in Siena where the association was presented in a press conference, and also another one in Naples the following month. In terms of coordination, the University of Siena has offered to host the secretariat of the association, building upon its experience, hosting the headquarters of PRIMA, the Partnership for Research and Innovation in Mediterranean, and STSN Mediterranean, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. But the coordination can evolve in the future as the members and the association grows. So it's just to start. And talking about start, we built up a web page for the association. It's a preliminary draft, and I have to thank Mira Manini-Tivari for this great work. And clicking on the link below, you can see the structure of the web page. Today, we want to discuss the prospects and the challenges that we may have on our way on the construction and the implementation of the association, but more generally, what are the challenges that the Mediterranean has to face. And for these, we have 4 speakers, 3 connected remotely and 1 in presence: Carmen Arguedas, Raja Chakir, Shouro Dasgupta, and Aldo Ravazzi. I will briefly introduce them, and then we'll go into the questions that I want to pose them. So Carmen Arguedas is full professor of economics at the Department of Economic Analysis at the Autonomous University of Madrid, and director of the Master in Quantitative Economic Analysis. She was head of department there from 17 to 19. She was president of the Spanish-Portuguese Association of Environmental Resource Economists until September 24, so recently, and she is still a council member of the European Association of Environmental and Resource Economists and co-editor of Resource and Energy Economics. Among her research interests are incentives and information programs related to the design and implementation of environmental policies, but also lab experiments to analyze behavior towards climate change. Raja Chakir is a researcher in economics at the Paris Saclay Applied Economics, INRAE-AgroParisTech, and board member of the French Association of Environmental Resource Economists. She's also a board member of the country representative of France for the European Association, and member of the editorial board of the European Review of Agricultural Economics. Among her research interests are land use modeling, agricultural economics, climate change and biodiversity, and environmental valuation. Shouro Dasgupta is researcher at CMCC and lecturer at the University Foscari in Venice. Among his research interests are the impacts of climate change on labor, food security, health, and inequality, and identifying hotspots and vulnerable populations to mitigate the problems that we have to face, and particularly mitigation and adaptation. And finally, last but not least, Aldo Ravazzi, who is present here next to me, is the chief economist at DG Sustainable Development, EU and International Relations of the Italian Ministry of the Environment. He chairs the OECD Committee Sustainable Finance and the privileged chair several other OECD committees. He served as technical coordinator at the G7 Environment Italian Presidency in 2017. He's also president of the Green Budget Europe and Italian representative at the International Resources Panel of UNEP and the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition of the World Bank, and the G20 peer review of fossil fuel subsidies. In his spare time, he's also a professor at Lewis University in Rome. So as you see from this brief description, all our panelists have long experience exactly on the topics we are interested in on the Mediterranean. But let me now go to some questions that I would like to propose them and share with them. Starting from this general question, then we will see where the conversation will bring us. Namely, what are the key challenges that you foresee in the Mediterranean climate, environmental, and resource governance in the coming 10 years? And I would invite, going in alphabetical order, Carmen to give her view on this topic. Carmen, can you hear us?
Yes, perfectly. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Simone, for the kind invitation and also for the kind introduction. Well, regarding your question, as you have said when you were introducing this panel, the Mediterranean is a climate change hotspot with, I would say, exacerbated vulnerabilities. So the increase in air temperature is more than what is in other places. Also, the increase in the sea level, increase in acidification. So there are many problems that are creating some consequences, such as heat waves, coastal erosion, fires. Also, you have mentioned floods, and as you probably have heard, we have a very big dana in the surroundings of Valencia in the last weeks that has caused more than 200 deaths, and this is something that we never experienced in Spain before. And we have also had some other danas with less dramatic consequences. But what this means is that all these extreme events happen more and more frequently, which is very, I would say, scary. So regarding your question, regarding the key challenges, I see many. I see many in many respects. So regarding food policy, for example, and regarding building climate-resistant crops and innovative technology. Also in water policy to prevent water pollution and coastal marine erosion, in energy policy to foster renewals, for example, solar, wind, green hydrogen, in urbanization and transport, in sustainable tourism, in circular economy. So there are many issues where we should work that need international funding, cross-border projects, and public awareness and education. And obviously, these challenges face also, I would say, key obstacles for cooperation. And in fact, if you have a look at the academic literature on cooperation, for example, the academic literature on international environmental agreements, or the literature on cooperative microeconomics, or even environmental monitoring and enforcement, you will see that many of the obstacles that are posed by this literature regarding the success in cooperation are somehow present in the Mediterranean. So, for example, countries in the Mediterranean are, well, obviously have short-term national priorities. There is a lot of political instability, and we are seeing it these days. Institutional complexity. I would also talk about weak institutions, so enforcement issues, also legal and regulatory barriers, diverging objectives, financial constraints, very heterogeneous players. So there are, I would say, several obstacles that prevent possibly this cooperation to be smooth. Well, I think I probably can stop here and maybe let the others complement what I'm saying.
Yeah, thank you, Carmen. Yes, indeed, the list is long, and obviously everyone can have a priority list, so to speak. So I invite Raja to give her view and maybe tell her, in her view, what we should prioritize, because indeed we will have to make a choice among the many problems that we have to face.
Yes, thank you very much, Simone, for the kind invitation also and for the introduction. So Carmen already mentioned a lot of key challenges that we all face globally, but also more specifically in Mediterranean area. And so she mentioned climate change. So I would say that the priority is to deal with climate change in terms of adaptation capacities, but also in terms of mitigation. And one key issue in Mediterranean countries in particular is inequality to access to solutions, for example, for adaptation. So this is a good, I think, important issue to deal with in terms of trying to limit inequalities and to have the same equality chances and mitigation in a region. So Carmen mentioned all issues related to climate change. I would focus on one of them, which is extreme events related to water. We all know that water is very important. And what's happening right now in the south of Spain, but also in Morocco. I am from Morocco, and in south of Morocco, the area have been facing drought for more than 30 years. And last October, they were facing many floods and many damages due to these extreme events. So we are navigating between droughts and floods, and we need to have long-term solution. And this is, of course, as Carmen mentioned, needs some institutional forces and governance. And also, this is in the two parts of Mediterranean countries, because what we observe at the global level sometimes is limited enforcement of existing agreements. So maybe we could push in this direction. You mentioned, Simone, the solution or how we could help in our point of view. I think that enforcement of in terms of research and also in terms of teaching, to try to exchange good practices and to take into account also local solutions, because sometimes we could not bring from our perspective solution to some areas that are facing some specific issues that could look like the regular issues, that's all we know, but some specific solutions could come from the ground. So we have to maybe go to the ground and try to collaborate in terms of finding solutions. That's all for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Raja. Yes, I like what you said, going to the ground and find also ad hoc solutions, because there won't be a one-fit-all solution, and we have to adapt to the single country situation. You were mentioning, both of you, Carmen and Raja, mentioning the problem of water and floods, and I think Shouro has a lot to say about this. Shouro, I'd like to hear from you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Simone, for the invitation and, of course, the very kind introduction. Great to be here. I join you from a very cold and dark Geneva. Carmen and Roger has mentioned several of the topics that are already close to me, and I feel that MED-EARE is at the forefront of addressing some of these challenges. But I'll list a few more emerging ones. To begin with, food insecurity and food systems transformation. Climate change-induced food insecurity is on the rise in Europe, and especially in the Mediterranean, several of the Mediterranean countries. This is something that may not be apparent when we discuss food insecurity challenges across the world. And there are several topics within food insecurity and food systems that needs addressing in terms of research. I believe MED-EARE can be at the forefront of addressing these research issues. Climate change and health. We have seen the emerging health issues due to floods this year in Spain, but also last year in Germany. Several new and emerging diseases induced by climate change. Infectious diseases are a major health issue on this regard, but two more are antibacterial resistance and waterborne diseases. Our health infrastructure, even in, let's say, the high-income European countries, are inadequate to address these challenges, as we have identified in the first European Union climate risk assessment. So again, on health impacts, given the heterogeneous nature of the Mediterranean countries, I believe, again, MED-EARE can lead on this challenge, on these research issues. The last one I want to mention, and we had lots of discussion in COP on this topic, is just transition and just transformation, not just the labor force, but on the economy as a whole. We have heard a lot of, let's say, debates and discussions around these topics, but there are not a lot of research, not even in Europe. Our association, and again, given the heterogeneous nature of countries, economies, the climate change exposure and vulnerabilities that these Mediterranean countries face, again, can lead on these research topics. So these are just a few. Going back to your original question to me, flood and droughts, both of these have major implications for our health infrastructure, our food insecurity, our labor force, and increasingly inequality. All this, I believe, can be addressed, not just addressed by MED-EARE, but the association is in a unique position to take the evidence that we can generate as researchers straight to policy and decision makers due to our close interaction and integration with policymakers and decision makers across and within Europe. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Shouro, also for your support in your words to the work that we want to do. And you were mentioning some important aspects like health infrastructures that are not ready to face our challenges, the inequality and the just transition aspects. And I think Aldo has a lot to say about these topics, particularly on the just and fair transition that we need to implement.
I would like to touch three elements which have been, I think, at the center of our discussion, of our works, of our research in the last years, and will be at the center with many of the topics that Simone introduced in his initial speech. The first one is the issue of energy efficiency. Because when we talk about climate policy, we are insisting obviously on renewables, and we need to develop and intensify and scale up renewables, but also we have to pay attention to the issue of energy efficiency. I come from a country, Italy, which has been historically with very high energy prices and very high taxation. And many people are complaining, producers, consumers, investors, because of the high energy prices. But we have learned in economics that when a resource is scarce, and we don't have natural resources for energy in my country, you have to give a price signal in order to have a wise use of the limited resources that you have, or you can buy and import from abroad. So this has led to an incredible performance in energy efficiency in my country. And this is part of the story. More and more I hear around forecasts about energy consumption, which should be doubled, tripled, or even more in the next 20, 30 years. And this is taken for granted. Old people like me have seen the same situation in the 70s when we had the great world oil crisis, the energy crisis. And then the forecasts for demand have been scaled down. Thanks to an effort for technological innovation, for resource efficiency, for using energy in a wise way. We are all aware, I think, of the benefits of artificial intelligence. But if artificial intelligence, information data banks which are the core artificial intelligence, demand a straight great increase in energy, we might have to give a price to that and find the right cost-benefit analysis. This is some of the good lessons we have learned from the Economist, is to try to understand what are the benefits, what are the costs, and to make a balance, to make the right choices. My second point is about green and sustainable finance, on which some countries have started to work. And this is to be intended in a double aspect. On one side, we want to raise finance for environment, starting with climate, adaptation, mitigation, early warning. And at the same time, we want to green the financial system. If we look at the past, we may say that thanks to original Rio UN summit in '92, the governments wake up and started to try to integrate environment and climate and sustainable development in their policies. And they've made many efforts. Not enough, not sufficient, but certainly there's a lot of work. In the year 2000, to simplify things, companies, firms, businesses have waken up and have started to integrate environment, climate, and sustainable development in their accounts, in their activities, in their investment. Not enough, but certainly we have to recognize the effort. And in the last 10, 15 years, we've seen finally the financial community waking up. Banks, insurances, institutional investors, they have started to integrate climate first in general environment and sustainable development inside their activities, their accounts, their financing of the economic system. This effort on green and sustainable finance must be also replicated at the Mediterranean level. The European Union members, which include most of the South Mediterranean countries, are making a big effort on this with the development of a taxonomy of sustainable activities and investment, with the climate disclosure, which is so important for our companies, with the financial reporting and sustainability reporting in the last form is quite interesting, and with this affirmation of the do no significant harm principle, which might be extremely useful. My third point is what, Simone, you called me on this, is the issue of just transition. And obviously we want a transition which is fair and equitable. May I attract our attention on the fact that climate policies are not coming from scratch. We are already in an economic landscape in which we already have inequalities, inequities, inefficiencies. And so we must pay attention that climate policies that we are asking to correct the economic system, to correct the market, do not increase inequalities and even contribute to reduce inequalities. But let's not forget that we have to work on the whole of the economic system in order to reduce inequalities and introduce fairness. It's not a matter only on climate, as we may sometimes understand from politicians, public opinions not well informed, from newspapers, media, and televisions.
Thank you, Aldo, for pointing out these three elements of energy efficiency as a powerful tool we forget about, extending the green and sustainable finance to the Mediterranean region, a challenge, but certainly important, and the just transition aspect that is not only about climate change. My second question to the speaker concerns best practices. What best practices or lessons have you learned from your research and the environmental cooperation organizations of which you have been a part? Basically, we want your experience to help us shape the association we work on. So I will start again from Carmen.
Thank you, Simone. What I would say is that for successful cooperation, probably you need two things, at least one important thing is to try to avoid probably too ambitious or unrealistic projects. So I think it's very important to be realistic and probably try first bilaterally. So we have had this great experience in AERNA, joining forces, Spanish and Portuguese researchers. And even if we share many things, on the other hand, we have some differences, and it has been key to proceed in this bilateral way with small projects to begin with. The other thing is probably to be successful in cooperating in this Mediterranean project, probably to avoid the Eurocentric narrative and try to be inclusive in the sense that having an inclusive narrative highlighting economic development in the Mediterranean and how cooperation will create jobs and growth in the region. So try to avoid the colonialistic approach, I would say. So in my opinion, this would be two key aspects in trying to develop cooperation in research in the Mediterranean.
Thank you, Carmen. If I may, what you said reminds me of another area, because as you probably know, I work very much on carbon markets and linking carbon markets. Proceeding bilaterally has been successful in some cases. The idea of expanding them to a global level works from bilateral agreements that should become then multilateral. It's also very difficult in that context. Hopefully it will be less difficult here, but it's a realistic view that I think it helps a lot to do baby steps to go in the right direction. Raja, your view on this?
Thank you very much, Simone. Yeah, indeed, as economists, we all have our solutions, which are theoretically validated in terms of market-based solutions and the necessity to take into account to implement, for example, carbon pricing. This is what you were mentioning, but also to bring some incentives for green investment. This is what was mentioned already also. So we all know that we need to have this cost-benefit analysis in any time we would like to take any decision. So this is the theoretical background that we bring as environmental economists. But in my point of view, to have a successful collaboration, we need to take the point of view of the ground, as I said before, in order, for example, to build some nature-based solutions that cannot come from anywhere. It should come from the local situation, and to try to find, given what we know from the theoretical point of view, and also all the mechanisms that we have in mind as economists, how to bring them into the ground and how to adapt them to local population and to local constraints in order to have something which will take into account also the justice and inequality. This is very important, this issue of taking into account the impact of local of our solution on local population in all from all sides in terms of food security, water availability, and also health issues that were mentioned before. I'm trying to remember if I have, yeah, and also, yeah, something very important is impact assessments. From the theoretical and economic point of view, in order to take a decision, we know we need at the beginning, before starting, to study the impact assessments from different kind of impacts in order to be sure that this is the right decision for the short, long term, but also from all other aspects that we could take into account. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Raja. Nature-based solutions are actually very much debated these days here at COP, and they're increasingly important. So it's very good that you mentioned that, because I think the Mediterranean has a lot to offer on this side in the global international debate. So it's again not something that concerns only the Mediterranean, but can be useful as a paradigm for many other discussions. Shouro, I call you on the stage now.
Hi, thank you. To go to answer about how best practices from other associations I've been involved in. So my involvement in Simone, as you know, has been quite a bit with the EAERE, for which I have been a council member. I think the EAERE has done great, led by you and Alessio, on involving and improving the stages and platforms for early career researchers. I think that is key moving forward. One is providing funding for them that EAERE is currently doing. I think even small amounts of funding goes a long way for early career researchers. The second is organizing special sessions for them in conferences. I think that sessions dedicated towards early career researchers can really help with feedback. It also provides them a platform to showcase their research, highlight their research, and of course, compare to their peer. And the third, Simone, that's something you have already promoted quite a bit in the associations you have been involved in, is sessions, special sessions organized by related organizations. I think those are key to improving inter-association work that Carmen also mentioned. I think so. 2 points I raise are early career researchers, small scholarships that EAERE is doing, and lots of special sessions, especially those organized by our sister associations. Thank you.
Thank you, Shouro. And indeed, the idea of working with sister associations is something that I think can help also in this context, and that we should reinforce. We are working on that, let's say. Aldo, your viewpoint.
Well, first of all, looking for best practices is always a good thing, because we see that there are good stories around that we can replicate, imitate, and diffuse. But we shouldn't satisfied only with best practices, because best practices are very often a small, limited world of maybe 5, 10%, 20% of the economic reality. What we need is to convince the rest, the remaining 80, 90, 95%, to go ahead. Do not leave anyone behind, as more important people say. Then among best practices, when we look around, there's a lot of research and studies that we should consider and take on board. We know all the work which is done here at the COPs in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We know that there is a lot of work also in a number of institutions and agreements, and obviously I'm thinking first of all to the Mediterranean Action Plan, which is served by UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Programme, with its secretariat in Athens and the network of centers of activity. And I'm happy to share with you the activity of Plan Bleu, which is based in France and has been historically the first think tank serving the Mediterranean, putting together experts from both sides of the Mediterranean, South Europe, North Africa, Middle East, in a way which, by the way, is also trying to contribute indirectly to prepare peace or to bring peace back. And among the recent work of Plan Bleu, may I mention that we have a strategy for sustainable development with a very important climate change component, which has been prepared by the Plan Bleu and approved by the Mediterranean Action Plan. We have a lot of work on the protection and quality of waters, of the sea, but also of all the waters incoming into the Mediterranean. This year, we have also worked a lot on economic instruments and environmental taxation for climate policy and sustainable development. We have launched a call. We have selected 8 papers. We are now published with issues about Mediterranean national and common policy. And we are launching a similar call on financial aspect, on green and sustainable finance for Mediterranean, which may attract interest by researchers and analysts. How can we use the greening of a financial system, making sustainable the financial system in order to advance in climate and sustainable development policies in Mediterranean. But we have also a number of good contributions coming from OECD, the organization based in Paris. Recently, we have issued a report on the alignment of climate policies with the Paris Agreement, looking at the relative efficiency, effectiveness of policies, which is extremely interesting. And OECD has also launched a so-called IFCMA, Inclusive Forum. In this period, many things try to be inclusive. An inclusive forum on climate mitigation approaches, which is not close to OECD, but is the organization opening itself to the global community and trying to work together to see how climate mitigation policies are working. And this might be extremely interesting for many Mediterranean countries as well. We have good work at MEDREC in Tunis, the climate center in Tunis, and also activities by IRENA, the International Renewable Agency, which is based in Abu Dhabi, but has a number of programs on the development of and scaling up of renewables around the globe, and Mediterranean is obviously an interesting area from this point of view. So I think that when we try to contribute as researchers, as analysts, to the analysis of Mediterranean policies, we have to pay attention to what already exists. And then we'll have a final round on which we will have maybe some ideas on how we can go forward.
Thank you, Aldo. Indeed, very many good examples we can look at. You said 5% probably are the real best practices. So in percentage terms, there might be a low share, but many examples exist, and many also institutions that we want to reach out to, also with your help. You mentioned Plan Bleu. This is a very good example that I had in mind, knowing your experience, and you can certainly, each of you can help us reaching out. And actually here at COP, it was already, yeah, it still works. Does it? Yes. Here at COP, it was already an occasion to meet with some of these people and start a conversation. But our conversation is approaching the end, so I will go now to our last question that I want to ask our panelists. And since we are approaching the end, what's next? The question is, what will be the role of MEDAERE going forward? How do you envisage this role? What we can or we should do, in your view, in the next months and hopefully years? Carmen.
Thank you, Simone. Well, I think the role of MEDAERE is key to pursue our goals in trying more cooperation in the Mediterranean, I would definitely continue with this idea of having workshops. Obviously, back to sister associations is easy because we are part of them. But I think one challenge could be, for example, to try a workshop like this one, for example, here in COP is amazing to have the opportunity to present me the EAERE here. But I would probably try other workshops in, for example, the southeast shore of the Mediterranean. It is very important to be in workshops with researchers also from the east and south shores. I learned a lot from a recent workshop I was involved in TETIS, this association that involves more than 30 universities from the north and south parts of the Mediterranean, in which I saw that we had to proceed with lots of diplomacy, but I think it was very, very good to have visions of researchers from the north and the south. So I would try to continue this idea of the workshops and try to meet more and share the problems, because it's really, really important. I think we can also take advantage of this visitors program that has been recently launched by you, Simone, in the European Association. I think it can be very important to have some of these visiting fellows going from from the south to the north and north to the south of the Mediterranean. So I hope we can have one of these grants to one of these scholars working on Mediterranean issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Yes, the visiting fellow program can help. And again, as you said, something bilateral. Today, this is the fil rouge of what you're saying. This should be applied in both directions. Raja, what about you? What's next for you?
Yeah, so almost everything was also already mentioned, but I just will complete by, cooperation is very important in both ways. This is important in research, but also in teaching. I think that we have to try to start with the new generation and bring new ideas and of course, taking into account what we have as new, which is the artificial intelligence. We could use this artificial intelligence in terms of trying to enhance our way of teaching and way also of doing research. This will be very helpful. And something else that MEDER could do also is having research projects, cooperation finding, trying to help for finding, for example, but also to have in all projects local stakeholders. I come back to my point on including and taking into account local opportunities. This is very important. Something also which is very important for me, I am applied economist, is data. So having good data, sharing good practices in how we could use data in terms of modeling and also in terms of providing this local assessment of impacts to take the good decision. This is also very important. Yeah, using these digital tools, of course, and to enhance the cooperation in both ways. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Raja. Indeed, teaching is skill, and using artificial intelligence is a tool that we cannot avoid and that we should actually navigate because it has huge potentialities. And what about you, Shouro?
Thank you, Simone. Building on the closed association that has been mentioned by the other speakers, one unique idea could be, of course, Carmen mentioned, having our conferences on the back of conferences of other associations that are wonderful, but we could think about what EAERE does as WCERA, right? Every 4 years, maybe we have one big conference, combining all the Mediterranean association conferences, right? Calling it a MED-EAERE by itself. That would be, I think, fantastic. MED-EAERE is really in a unique position, both geographically and politically. I think that's unlike any other association or organization I can think of in academia to take these issues forward. We really can, and we should probably wield our influences at the local level, at the national level, at the Mediterranean level, and at the European level with all our research. It is with great size. We have great power to influence both academic practices and probably use those academic practices and evidence for effective decision making at the local and national levels, onwards and upwards. I think we're, again, I keep mentioning unique, but MED-EAERE is in a unique position to achieve all this, and I thank you for bringing all of us together on this, Simone.
Well, thank you, Shouro, and actually thank you also for participating, you, Carmen and Raja, so early on your side, because it's almost in the middle of the night for you, so I do appreciate your being here in this moment. But I also appreciate having Aldo in person here, and I want to take advantage of this to have his view.
Well, I think we have benefited from the European Association of Environmental and Resource Economists and all the other associations, because it has been a fantastic source of ideas, of analysis for public policies. And the Mediterranean Association can and should be another fascinating source for Mediterranean policies. Having in mind maybe two things, that when we review, analyze, and propose solutions, we should keep in mind what we call the triple crisis, which is existing. We are talking about climate, but also about biodiversity, but also about pollution, starting with plastics. A triple crisis which is accompanied regrettably by an unpleasant other triple crisis of economic financial nature, of energy prices increasing nature, of bellic war issues that we know are concerning us in this period. So we have to pay attention to the whole framework in which we live. And the second point, I think, in developing analysis, we should pay attention and encourage our countries, all of our countries, to work alone, independently, autonomously. We have a number of things we have to do in climate policies that we can do alone, each of our countries. But doing things together is much easier, is much more efficient and effective. So we have a lot of return if we cooperate and do things together. This is extremely important. I see a sort of problem of our economist community, because we are sometimes captured by beta coefficient and excess of technical econometric analysis to the technicality, which is important, is the basis for analysis, but we should not be captured. So it's extremely important that we go ahead from the economist point of view, that we contribute to the ideas that we received from the Club of Rome, the planetary boundaries approach, and we bring them into the policy area. There's a lot of space for economists, and we need to have more economic analysis in the Framework Convention on Climate and in national and Mediterranean policies.
Thank you, Aldo. It somehow connects to what Shouro was saying on the importance of influencing decision-making, but influencing in a way that we move towards cooperation. And I think this is the perfect place to talk about this. Despite the difficulties that we see in these days, we cannot hide that the difficulties continue in creating this cooperation. Multilateralism is not high at the moment, multilateralism, I would say. But even with our small contribution, I think we can be useful. So we reached the end of our discussion, and I think it was very rich and with many interested and inspiring insights for me. what I want to say in conclusion somehow resembles these last few words, because the dream, if I may call it, with which the association was born is that of strengthening cooperation with the southern and eastern shore of the Mediterranean, because I think we should reach out to those scholars who are scattered and isolated and have no occasion to be part of larger associations as we have in Europe, and also an occasion to cooperate with the African, with the Asian association. I think that this could become a sort of lab experiment that could provide ideas also in other contexts, because we are talking about the Mediterranean, but now we are on the Caspian Sea, and there are similar common problems among the countries on this sea. What about the Black Sea? What about the Northern Sea? Don't you think that this is something that can become useful elsewhere? So I would like to stress that this is not only about the Mediterranean, and we want to be somehow inclusive. The inclusiveness has been mentioned several times. Inclusive not only on the Mediterranean, but towards all scholars who are interested on common resource problems. So in this sense, our ambition is somehow going beyond our borders, our European borders, but also inducing more cooperation worldwide. And I think there are synergies that we can exploit, and we are trying to exploit them here at COP, but we should keep fighting for that elsewhere. And so the next steps will be something that goes in this direction beyond COP somehow. I already see some possible new events coming up from the organizers of our associations and for single members. So basically, I'll be back to you hopefully very soon with other events like this. And on this I close, and I really thank you so much, all of you, for being here today and for waking up early on your side, and Aldo for being here with me on this, for me, important occasion. So thank you all, and see you soon.
Thank you very much, Simone.
Thank you very
Simone.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, have a nice day.
Bye. Bye.